Is everybody ready? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I hereby call this remote meeting of the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission to order. This meeting is being recorded as well as streamed live for the public. Mr. Smith, do we have a quorum today?
Mr. Chair Hart, we have a quorum. You're present. Commissioner Bob is present. Commissioner Fardyke is present. Commissioner Rush is present. And Commissioner Lott is present.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. We will start today with our safety message from the Metro Rail Safety Commission's Emergency Management Specialist, Richard David. Mr. David.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Here's a few safety tips for your Independence Day festivities. Never allow young children to handle fireworks. Never use fireworks while impaired by drugs or alcohol. Do not try to relight or handle malfunctioning fireworks. And keep a bucket of water nearby in case of a fire and to fully extinguish fireworks that do not go off. Also, remember to follow your municipality's recommended guidelines for grilling and safe grill distances from structures. Enjoy your 4th. Stay healthy, stay informed, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. David. We will now vote on approving the minutes from our last meeting. Secretary Treasurer Fardyke, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. The minutes of May 24th meeting were posted for your review. In addition, I would like to report on the executive session held on May 24th, 2022. The commissioners confirmed that they discussed only internal WMSC personnel matters in accordance with the requirements of the Sunshine Act during that executive session. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, I move approval of the May 24th minutes as circulated. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Bob as second the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay.
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 Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
Commissioner Bob, can you confirm for me that you voted in the affirmative?
Yes, I did vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. Commissioner Fardyke, the motion passes 4-0.
Did you say 4 or do we have 5 votes?
I'm sorry. 5-0. I had written down 4 until I got Commissioner Bob's. You're right.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Next on our agenda is providing an opportunity for public comments as we do at each of our meetings. And we will now ask if any members of the public who have joined our Zoom webinar would like to speak. If you would, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom and our staff will unmute one person at a time. Each person will have a maximum of 2 minutes. I will pause now to see if we have any public comments. While we're waiting, I would like to remind everyone, including those of you watching on YouTube, that you can always report any concerns through our website, WMSC.gov, through our social media channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or by email. Ms. Minor, do we have anyone who has indicated they would like to speak?
No, I see no hands.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Minor. We will now continue with the next agenda item, which is my remarks. Our meeting today includes updates on the WMSC's ongoing safety oversight activities, including those on Silver Line Phase 2, the return to service of 7,000 series trains, and the certification of Metro Rail personnel. Regarding the return of the 7,000 series rail cars, the WMSC communicated to WMATA on May 19 that it had no technical objection to Metro Rail's plan. Metro Rail's plan calls for returning up to 8 trains per day to passenger service. The WMSC is also continuing our active involvement in the NTSB investigation of the October 12, 2021 derailment. Today's meeting will also include the reports of several safety event investigations concerning serious injuries and roadway worker incidents. WMSC staff will present details of these events that occurred on the Metro Rail system earlier this year. Commissioners will be asked to adopt a revised WMSC program standard reflecting changes to the procedures and processes which govern our work and the processes and procedures which Metro Rail must have in place to comply with this program standard. The WMSC commenced the second of our triennial audit cycles this month with the track audit. Throughout today's public meeting, we will discuss our safety oversight work. Dr. Meyer, do you have any opening remarks?
Find my cursor here. Yes, I do. Give me just a moment. I do want to begin talking about Silverline by talking about Silverline Phase 2. On June 23rd, Metro Rail declared operational readiness and took control of the Silverline extension, which includes 6 new Silverline stations, 11.4 miles of new track, and a new rail yard. This marks the transfer of the project from the Airports Authority to WMATA. In preparation for passenger service, Metro Rail will now test the tracks and the systems, train and familiarize its personnel with the yard, main line, and stations, and ensure that the extension is ready for service. The WMSC has been conducting oversight work on this project since 2019, and this has included on-site inspections, regular communications with all parties. In March of this year, we wrote to WMATA's Chief Safety Officer about the work that we will complete on this project. The work includes site visits and observations of Metro Rail's training and familiarization activities. The WMSC will also review documents and records to ensure that they've been updated for the new extension. Additionally, the WMSC will observe the full-scale emergency exercises that have been planned for July and August. These exercises will evaluate the preparedness of Metro Rail and first responders to respond to emergencies on the new extension and the new yard. You will hear more about Phase 2 of the Silverline a little later in the meeting, but for now, let me say that the WMSC is prepared to continue working with Metro Rail and at Metro Rail's pace as Metro Rail conducts and completes its safety certification of the extension. Now I will turn to the 7000 series rail cars. On May 19th, the WMSC communicated to Metro Rail that we have no technical objections to its plan to return the 7000 series cars to passenger service. Specifically, we found that the return to service plan that Metro Rail submitted that same day met the requirements of our December 29th order. The plan calls for daily wheel gauge or back-to-back measurements using digital dial gauges. The WMSC is not aware of any back-to-back measurement failures since Metro Rail began returning 7000 series rail cars to passenger service on June 16th. The plan calls for no more than 64 rail cars to be used in passenger service each day. That's a maximum of 8 8-car trains per day. Since returning the cars to passenger service on June 16th, we have not independently observed Metro Rail reaching that operating limit. However, according to information received from Metro Rail personnel earlier today, it has operated 8 trains on just 2 days since June 16th, yesterday and today. We have directly observed Metro Rail execution of its return to service plan. For example, WMSC staff have observed training for conducting back-to-back measurements, and we've also visited the rail yards where back-to-back measurements are being conducted to verify that trained personnel are conducting them according to the plan. For Metro Rail to release more 7000 series rail cars for passenger use or to make any other changes to the return to service plan, such as using an automated inspection method, they will need to submit a proposed amendment to their plan and receive a no technical objections determination from the WMSC. Our December 29th order requires WMATA to submit any proposed amendment to its return to service plan for a 14-day review period prior to implementation for the WMSC to determine whether there are any technical objections to the proposal. Turning to another safety issue, you will remember that our rail operations audit issued in April found that Metro Rail is not effectively training and certifying train operators. And in May, the WMSC communicated to Metro Rail leadership that Metro Rail had stopped recertifying its train operators entirely. Metro Rail subsequently began to focus on performing recertifications expeditiously. Based on the recent status update provided to us on this issue, Metro Rail expects that all train operator certifications and refresher training will be current by the 1st of October this year. The WMSC has done its own independent verification of Metro Rail's recent train operator certification activities, and with your permission, Mr. Chair, Bruce Walker, our rail operations expert, will describe these activities and observations.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Please proceed, Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Chair Hart. The limited availability of trains for training and certification activities was identified as part of our rail operations audit. Since the end of May, the WMSC has been monitoring the train operator recertification process closely. I've been in contact with frontline training personnel to confirm and verify equipment has been and continues to be made available. In addition to maintaining communication with Metrorail to discuss train operator certification, I've also performed independent on-site verification. While in the WMATA rail yard, I observed from a distance the pre-certification and certification process. If Metrorail continues to make the necessary equipment and staff available for its recertification plan, they should be able to achieve their target date to have all train operators back in compliance. I will continue to keep a close eye on these activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Also, during our last public meeting on May 24th, we mentioned that all rail traffic controllers were current on their certifications. The WMSC has done its own independent verification through spot checks on this front, and with your permission, again, Mr. Chair, Adam Quigley, our investigations program manager, will describe these activities and observations.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Please proceed, Mr. Quigley. Mr. Quigley, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. During our May 24th public meeting, we said that all rail traffic controllers were current in their certifications. This information was believed to be accurate, but it was not. Since our last meeting, the ROC director led a review of controller certifications. The ROC director recently hired an experienced quality assurance manager that has been tasked with building a quality assurance department in the ROC that will have oversight and ownership of all ROC QA processes and procedures, including controller certification and recertification. In the meantime, the Metrorail team that is currently responsible for recertifying train operators is also responsible for recertifying rail traffic controllers. Given the urgent need for train operators to be recertified, the ROC director was told that controller recertification might be adversely affected. This prompted the ROC director to expedite his plan of moving controller certification and recertification into the ROC under the recently hired QA manager. A week after we made the statement, the ROC director discovered discrepancies with the recertification dates while reviewing controller training records. Discrepancies prompted the ROC director to decide to recertify all the controllers. This recertification effort is now underway and should be complete by the end of July so that each controller's recertification records will be reliable and accurate. Going forward, the ROC itself will maintain the official rail traffic controller certification records, which should prevent future discrepancies. I will continue to monitor this effort as it evolves. Thank you.
So the WMSC has been following Metrorail's work to assess the requirements in the WMSC order. I guess by way of transition, I'm moving on to a different topic. I want to talk to you for just a moment about power restoration. And we've been following the Metro's activities to address the requirements of our power restoration order that was issued last month. Until addressed, and to control the workload associated with power restoration, our order imposes limits on the number of work locations. And Mr. Quigley, you just heard from, and Ms. Quiroz regularly verify WMATA's compliance with the power desk order by utilizing our direct access to WMATA's systems and information. Our access to the general order and track right system, or GODERS, has allowed us to monitor WMATA's compliance with the overnight work location limits and verify that they are in compliance. I would add that, as also required by our order just yesterday, Metrorail submitted a proposed power restoration CAP, or corrective action plan, and we will evaluate their proposal and provide a response very soon. Mr. Chair, with the helpful assistance of the experts, that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Just a quick question from me. One is how frequently are the operators recertified, and how frequently are the controllers recertified?
So I'm going to ask Mr. Walker to start off with the train operators.
Chair Hart, so the recertification efforts are taking place Monday through Friday. And historically, they were doing, one QA person was doing one per day. Because of the backlog, they have restructured so that multiple certifications are taking place per day.
Mr. Walker, I believe he.
I'm sorry. I thought I was muted. Excuse me. I'm sorry, Dr. Meyer.
I think that Chair Hart was asking, how long is a certification good for once it's been accomplished?
Okay.
That's correct.
Oh, sorry for that. So the certification is good for a 2-year period, but the train operators will have a continuing education requirement that they will return within 1 year for a currency training, but the certification itself is good for a 2-year period.
Is there a medical fitness requirement associated with that?
That is being handled in our fitness for duty audits. As of now, no, but that is something that is being addressed with our fitness for duty audit.
And just to put a finer spin on that, yes, there is a requirement, but our audit showed that Metro is not living up to that requirement and not actually conducting medical fitness activities, and that needs to be addressed as part of corrective action on that front.
Okay, thank you. And same question for the controllers.
Once a year, sir.
Once a year, thank you. Any questions from any of the other commissioners for Dr. Meyer or the other staff?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
I think it's interesting that the ROC controllers are all going to be recertified, and certainly we're on the operators we're making strides to recertify all of them. But the one issue that we'll have in the future is that unless you stagger these recertifications, they're all going to expire a year from now for the ROC controllers, or 2 years from now for the operators. Has anybody talked about that, or how they're going to stagger the recertification so we don't hit a date and suddenly nobody's certified to operate the control center or operate the trains?
Your concern is, of course, completely accurate, but as far as I know, the answer is no. We have not had conversations about any wisdom about staggering recertification, unless Mr. Walker or Mr. Quigley, you have anything to add.
No, Dr. Meyer, your answer is correct, but that is something that I will bring forward.
I think that would be great if you would, bring it forward to those in charge of the recertification, because it should be staggered so that all of these certifications don't expire at the same time, or we're going to end up the same place that we are right now.
Thank you for that excellent point, Commissioner Lobby. I appreciate that. Any further questions from any of the other commissioners? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a status update on the orders related to the 7000 series rail cars. Ms. Samara Singha.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Since the WMSC gave no technical objections to WMATA's revised return to service plan, which was dated May 19th, Metrorail has begun putting 7000 series rail cars back in passenger service. Metrorail's plan calls for no more than 64 cars to be used in passenger service each day. That's a maximum of 8 car trains per day, as Dr. Meyer noted as well. Since returning the cars to passenger service on June 16, we have not independently observed Metrorail reaching that operating limit of 8 car trains per day. However, according to information received from Metrorail personnel earlier today, it has operated 8 trains on just 2 days since June 16th, yesterday and today. Each 7000 series rail car that is in passenger service is required to undergo a daily back-to-back measurement and meet several other measurement and pre-revenue checks. In order for Metrorail to release more 7000 series rail cars for revenue service safely, WMSC has communicated to Metrorail that it needs to provide evidence that the automated wayside system, or AWIS or AWIS, that Metrorail plans to rely on is in place and in place of manual back-to-back inspection and has been safety certified, and that the measurements generated by this AWIS are reliable and valid, and that personnel who are responsible for receiving and acting upon the data generated by AWIS have received clear instructions and that they have been trained on these requirements. As specified in the December 29, 2021 order, Metrorail must submit any proposed changes to its plan to the WMSC for review. The WMSC will determine if it has any technical objections before any such changes are implemented by Metro. On June 24th, Metrorail submitted an initial draft of its phase 2 return to service plan, which includes the use of this AVIS or automated wayside inspection system to the WMSC. As we have explained to Metrorail through our ongoing communications, particularly on the topic of the use of the automated wayside inspection system, the WMSC requires Metrorail to demonstrate that this AVIS system is, this AVIS is reliable, that the measurement data is as valid as data gathered through manual back-to-back inspections, and that the AVIS is safety certified, and that the personnel who are responsible for receiving and acting upon the data generated by the system have received clear instructions and that they have been trained on these instructions. We are carefully reviewing this initial phase 2 return to service plan, and we will provide any needed feedback on this proposal. We will continue to work with WMATA, providing comments until we believe this next phase of their plan is sufficient and can be implemented safely, at which point we will indicate that we have no technical objections. The WMSC continues to monitor the progress of Metrorail's implementation of their return to service plan through ongoing and frequent interaction with WMATA staff at all levels in a variety of functional areas at WMATA. The WMSC staff conducted observations of the various training activities geared towards training a critical number of railcar mechanics, railcar supervisors, rail quality specialists, and rail operations personnel, and other WMATA personnel having responsibilities in carrying out the back-to-back manual inspections of the 7000 series railcars and responsibilities in ensuring no 7000 series railcar is released for service until it has met the carefully assembled inspection requirements to ensure no wheel migration has occurred. Our staff observed back-to-back inspections at Alexandria Yard, Branch Avenue Yard, and at Greenbelt Yard over the course of the last few weeks, and have reported that the work is being carried out as specified and that there have been no deficiencies found on performing back-to-back inspections. Our team also observed that some 7000 series railcars which have failed wheel sets were being stored at West Falls Churchyard improperly. There were labels and signage missing in contrast to the governing procedure referred to as SBF 110, which dictates specific labeling and signage to be placed on these cars that have failed wheel sets. WMSC staff brought this to the attention of Metrorail personnel to be corrected. Also related to the 7000 series rail cars, the WMSC team continues to participate in all aspects of the NTSB investigation into the cause of the October 12, 2021 7000 series rail car train derailment between Roslyn and Arlington Cemetery stations. This includes discussion and participation in specific investigation groups, reviewing test procedures, and providing very insightful and productive additions to the various tests being designed and conducted to determine probable causes for the 7000 series railcar wheel migration. To date, there are no probable causes that have been determined by the NTSB. The WMSC continues to share our insight with Metrorail and NTSB on a variety of aspects pertaining to the 7000 series railcars. Our interactions with Metrorail and the NTSB are at several levels of the organization, and these interactions occur several times a week. This is a hallmark of our work, transparency and information sharing, and it will continue to be upheld consistently. Thank you, and that completes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Samar-Singer, for that very comprehensive report on what's happening with the 7000 series cars. So can I assume that when you say there are no probable cause determined yet by the NTSB, that means it's not known yet why the wheels were moving on the axles?
That is correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Samar-Singer? Thank you. We will now move on to our next item, which is audits, with an update from Audit and CAPS Program Specialist, Ms. Ashley Rhodes. Ms. Rhodes?
Thank you, Chair Hart. As we mentioned during our last meeting, the final audit of this 3-year cycle relates to Metro Rail's communications systems practices. This includes assessment of Metro Rail functional areas with roles in inspection, maintenance, training, engineering, and governance of voice or data transmission systems and related equipment at Metro Rail. We are continuing our internal review of the draft report. Once the draft report is ready, the WMSC will transmit it to WMATA for their 30-day review period. The WMSC's next 3-year cycle commenced earlier this month and is now underway. The first of our audits in this new triennial cycle is an audit of track maintenance and related infrastructure. Our audit team is concluding interviews and on-site work this week, at which point the audit team will begin development of any potential findings or recommendations. Following the exit conference for this audit, which is planned for early August, the WMSC will prepare the draft report, which will contain findings and recommendations, and provide it to WMATA for its 30-day review, consistent with the WMSC program standard. As with each of our audits, the work on this audit included extensive reviews of Metro Rail documents, on-site work such as interviews with various personnel from frontline through upper management, and site visits to various parts of the Metro Rail system to observe track inspection, maintenance, and renewal activities, and to compare these against Metro Rail's own requirements by which this work is governed. Our audits assess Metro Rail against the relevant criteria, such as the requirements of Metro Rail's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, requirements specified in other Metro Rail documents such as SOPs, orders, and regulatory requirements. In preparation for our next audit on WMATA's internal safety reviews, we transmitted the notification letter and initial document requests to WMATA earlier this month. The requested documents are due by July 5th, and interviews are planned for August. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Rhodes? Okay, thank you. Hearing none. We will now take up the next agenda item, which is corrective action plans. Ms. Rhodes will also provide this update. Ms. Rhodes?
Thank you, Chair Hart. When Metro Rail develops corrective action plans to address the safety deficiencies identified by WMSC findings and recommendations, Metro Rail submits these plans to the WMSC for review and approval. After Metro Rail submits acceptable CAP proposals, Metro Rail is responsible for implementing its corrective action plans on the schedule documented in the CAP. We monitor the work that is progressing on each CAP as WMATA implements the corrections to close the safety gaps that we identified. The WMSC received the first versions of the station maintenance, elevator, and escalator CAP proposals last week. After careful review, the WMSC will provide feedback on these proposals as stated in our program standard. Since our last public meeting, the WMSC has approved closure of 5 CAPs. TOC COL 015-003A was aimed at railing systems in shops and other facilities with swing gates that could swing into the dynamic envelope of a rail car. Metro Rail replaced certain railings with a new gate design that uses a sliding mechanism in place of a swing mechanism. In other locations, swing gates were welded to prevent the gate from swinging into the dynamic envelope. While the welds prevent the identified hazard, Metro Rail has committed to replacing these older style railings through future projects at these locations. C0074 addressed finding 4 of the elevated structures audit, which found that a new structural inspection manual was made effective without any associated training for employees responsible for implementing it. WMATA has since created initial training and a training matrix that includes a requalification cycle. Structural inspectors are now trained on the program. C0075 and C0078 were also products of the Elevated Structures Audit. C0075 addressed outdated and conflicting references in structural inspection training documents, including manuals, SOPs, and training material. These were revised and updated for consistency and to establish certification and recertification standards. C0078 addressed the finding of a lack of structures inspection supervisor presence in the field with the creation of 2 new supervisor positions dedicated to field time and training. C0117 addressed the lack of software standards found in the automatic train control audit by updating manuals and clarifying ATC software requirements. As we mentioned during our last meeting, the WMSC rejected the cap closure request for C0037 related to power restoration. If Metrorail has not completed work required under a cap, the WMSC will not close the cap. The request for this cap closure came after an improper power restoration event occurred in a work zone on April 26th. The WMSC issued an order rejecting that closure request and required Metrorail to develop and submit a revised cap proposal. When Metrorail submits revised cap proposals, the WMSC team carefully reviews these proposals and provides feedback for approval or implementation. The WMSC received a submittal from WMATA yesterday pertaining to the May order regarding improper power restoration. We will review this submittal closely and respond accordingly. Following implementation and closure of any cap, the WMSC monitors Metrorail's actions through our audits, inspections, and other oversight activities to confirm that Metrorail is continuing the safety improvements it has implemented through the corrective action plan. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Rhodes?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lally.
How many caps are currently open with WMATA?
I have a spreadsheet that I can get you that exact number in just a moment once I make a couple clicks.
And is the number of caps growing or are they shrinking? We closed 5. Is the number still rising or is it turned around and going down?
That's a difficult question to answer as some caps are closed and then some caps are created anew with additional audit efforts. So I can't tell you the numerical trend, but I think that's a number that or a trend that I could identify for you as well if given.
And I would ask that we not do that in real time. We are working very, very hard to get a better handle and a better quantitative control over the numbers of caps that we have. The number has increased. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it has increased because it increases each time we do an audit, and it also decreases each time Metrorail successfully satisfies all the requirements of the cap. We are managing, I believe it's just north of about 100 caps right now, and we've closed many caps throughout our time as a certified state safety oversight agency. But I think it would be smarter if we come back to you with a presentation on this rather than try to analyze the data on the fly.
I think that's fine. I was just interested to know if the number was still growing, because obviously the more caps that Washington Metro has to respond to, to me it indicates that we're finding additional issues, and certainly I'm looking forward to the day when the caps decrease and we get some programs in place at Washington Metro that allows us to close many of these. But I'm just looking for ways to get a feeling on how Washington Metro is doing responding to these caps.
A cursory initial look would suggest there's 118 open, but as David stated, we could certainly come back to you with a more formal response.
Okay, I just like to be interested in the trends.
How's Metro doing responding to these caps? I mean, We exchange information every single day on CAPs and CAP progress. Metro takes them very, very seriously. Metro proposes for itself, and then we, with comments and feedback, approve any deadlines and action plans related to implementation. And it is a very involved management process. But I don't want to leave any impression. Metro takes it seriously. The caps are not growing because of any reason that Metro doesn't take it seriously. They do. They are closing caps, and we are also auditing and creating new caps. And this is part of that continuous improvement cycle. So I don't want to suggest that the presence of a cap is in and of itself a bad thing.
Well, I understand that. Again, I'm just looking for a way to get a feeling on what's happening at Washington Metro. And you know, certainly Chair Hart and you, Mr. Meyer, were from NTSB, and NTSB has recommendations, and they kind of keep score on what's going on in the industry by the number of open recommendations and closed recommendations. And you know, I consider caps similar to recommendations, and certainly any progress that Washington Metro is making should be reflected eventually in those numbers. So I think that may be an important parameter to be looking at to try to get an idea of where we are in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby, for the question. Are there any questions from any other commissioners for Ms. Rhodes? Okay, hearing none, we will now move to our next agenda item, which is our regular status report on our oversight of Silver Line Phase 2 safety certification. Mr. Sahu?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Hart. Metro Rail declared operational readiness last week and has taken provisional care, custody, and control of the line. As I've reported in previous months, the WMSC has conducted several activities overseeing the safety certification of the Silver Line Phase 2 while it was under MWA's control. While doing so, we noted safety gaps to MWA, which were also documented in our pre-revenue service report, the PRSR, directed at MWA. Many of these safety issues were resolved and evidence provided to us. Several dozen such items have been closed. We are now tracking approximately 21 open items. These open items have agreed upon paths forward through Package K task orders. Package K is a follow-on task order specific contract on work requested by WMATA of MWA, even though the work was not clearly specified by the original contract for the design build contractor. The work will be completed between ORD, which is operational readiness date, and ROD, which is revenue date. The WMSC will continue to verify the corrections and close these items when the work is completed. The WMSC has been conducting ongoing oversight activities related to the Silver Line Phase 2 project since 2019 as the project progressed, and we will continue with our pre-revenue service review work while Metro Rail's pre-revenue activities continue. The work which the WMSC has been conducting to carry out our mandated role in this project has included site visits to various parts of the guideway, wayside buildings like traction power substations, and site visits to the newly constructed rail yard near the Dulles International Airport. Our work has also included information sharing with MWA, Metro Rail, FTA Project Management Oversight Team, or the PMOC, and representatives from the local jurisdictions. We have work sessions as often as weekly with MWA, Metro Rail, and the FTA Project Management Team, and we participate in information sharing meetings, which include Loudoun County and Fairfax County, and have shared materials on the scope of WMSC's work, and we will endeavor to keep everyone informed about our work. As the operational readiness date drew near, the WMSC started having more frequent planning discussions with the WMATA Silver Line Phase 2 project leadership. We will continue to work closely with all parties to ensure that any aspect requiring resolution is discussed and resolved expeditiously. In March of this year, we provided formal communication to WMATA reminding its chief safety officer about the work we'll complete on this project through a sampling of site visits, training and familiarization observations, reviewing a sample of documents and records to ensure these have been updated, and also to ensure that the IT infrastructure, manuals, spare parts are all in place for beginning or commencing of Silverline Phase 2. WMSC will track Metrorail safety certification activities by using the very same requirements WMATA has been working towards through its Silverline Phase 2 rail activation efforts since 2020. As Dr. Meyer mentioned earlier, WMSC will observe full-scale emergency exercises scheduled for July and August, which will evaluate the readiness of Metrorail and the first responders to assist with emergencies on the new extension. The WMSC will consider the need for any mitigations if any gaps are identified in the emergency response plans. Along with these verification activities I just described, we'll use WMATA's SSCVR approved by its Safety Certification Review Committee, along with evidence that WMATA has met Condition 8 of the cooperative agreement between MWA and Metrorail. And that states project has achieved certification by the Metro Chief Safety Officer for the WMSC to concur that this extension is ready for revenue operations. The final stages of our work include ensuring that Metrorail has met its staffing, training, and testing requirements to safely operate the extension, and that Metrorail has taken the other steps required by its own safety certification program plan and the cooperative agreement between MWA and Metrorail. The WMSC and Metrorail expect to share draft documents related to the PRSR and the SSCVR on an ongoing basis as part of our already ongoing open communication regarding any identified issues to continue to keep this process moving smoothly. Our concurrence is required before the line may open for passenger service. Thank you. That completes this presentation, Chair Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Sahu. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Sahu? Okay, hearing none, I'm now going to move to the consent agenda. We have one report on our consent agenda today. Investigation Whiskey 0173 is a report related to a serious injury resulting from a person intentionally placing themselves in the path of a train. This is considered an accident under our program standard and federal regulation, and we have placed this on the consent agenda. Does any commissioner wish to ask questions about this report? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adopt this report, Whiskey 0173. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay. Yay.
Yay.
Any opposed? Please raise your hand and say nay.
Chair Hart, the vote is 5-0 and the motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We will now move on to the safety event investigation reports that are being presented here today. We will hear presentations on all the reports, then consider in a single motion all of the reports that we are prepared to adopt. If any commissioner wishes to remove a report from the group that we will consider for adoption in a single vote, please indicate that at the end of the presentation on that report. Investigation Program Manager Adam Quigley is presenting the first three reports. Mr. Quigley.
Thank you, Chair Hart. The first investigation we're prepared to present today is Investigation Whiskey 0168. This investigation involved a rider who was struck by a train at Fort Totten Station on February 25th, 2022. While waiting on the yellow and green line platform at Fort Totten Station, a rider leaned slightly over the platform's edge to look for the approaching train. Review of the CCTV footage showed the rider was not looking in the correct direction when train 301 entered the station, striking them in the back of the head. The train operator had restricted view while approaching the station platform due to a curve that ends within the platform limits. The train operator was traveling at 31 miles per hour entering the station, which is below Metrorail's 40-mile-an-hour limit on station entry speed. The train operator was initially unaware that the collision occurred and continued to the end of the platform, where they stopped the train and serviced the station. The train operator then reported to the ROC that they had felt a thud against the lead car of the train, which they thought at first was from a passenger making contact with the operator's cab door. The rail traffic controller instructed the train operator to investigate. Riders on the platform and an MTPD officer already on the scene attempted to assist the injured rider on the platform. The MTPD officer requested medical assistance and reported to the train operator that the person may have been struck by the train. The ROC operations manager notified the DC Office of Unified Communications, and a response for an injured person was dispatched approximately 3 minutes after the person was struck. Approximately 9 minutes after the person was struck, the ROC operation manager called to report a person struck by a train on the lower level platform. Dispatcher alerted the units already dispatched to the station of the new information and dispatched a rescue alarm to the station. The person struck was released from the hospital the following day. Metro Rail currently has mitigations throughout the system, such as tactile edge treatments and flashing lights. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Quigley? Okay, hearing none, Mr. Quigley will present the next report. Mr. Quigley, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0169 involved a serious injury of a contractor at Potomac Yard Station, March 2nd, 2022. A Metro Rail subcontractor fell while installing glass on a canopy at Potomac Yard Station and sustained a concussion, leg and shoulder fractures, and a facial laceration. The contractor was wearing a personal fall arrest system that had not been properly adjusted. The contractor was working on installation of skylight glass on the canopy over tracks 1 and 2 at the station when the event occurred. While working in a 4-person team, the contractor acted as one of 2 glazers. Glazers are responsible for installing and sealing glass panels that are lifted and set in place by the crane operator. Just before the event occurred, the glazer installed a glass panel on the lower row of the canopy and then skipped 2 bays at the expansion joint, leaving them open. The glazer moved to the first glass panel past the expansion joint to wait for the next piece of glass to be lifted by the crane. While waiting for the glass, the glazer adjusted their vertical light fine system rope and went back to fix the panel they had just installed. The glazer failed to readjust the rope when they returned to the first glass panel past the expansion joint. The glazer was wearing full personal protective equipment and fall protection equipment, including a Guardian synthetic vertical light fine system with integrated manual rope grab that was attached to the permanent engineered anchor points on the canopy. While continuing to wait for the crane operator to lift the place the glass panel, the glazer stepped back into one of the open bays where they skipped glass installation and fell to the ground below. The glazer fell approximately 22 feet and 6 inches. Contractor personnel on the scene contacted 911 directly to request emergency medical assistance. Alexandria Fire Department responded and transported the injured contractor to George Washington University Hospital. The event was not reported to the ROC by on-site personnel. The ROC Fire Liaison Officer was notified of the event by the fire department. Following the event, work was suspended at the site. WMATA personnel were dispatched and the scene was cordoned off for investigation. Virginia Department of Labor and Industry representatives inspected the site the following day. Testing on the personal fall arrest system and harness determined that the fall arrest system was adjusted to where an uncontrolled fall would arrest near the ground and operated as intended. The investigation also found that the 2 glazers were both tied off on the same roof anchor, which is only designed to support 1 person. There was no signature from the injured subcontractor on forms kept by the contracting company indicating that they took the subcontractor orientation, which is required of workers before they begin working on the construction site. The injured subcontractor did not undergo drug and alcohol testing when they were admitted. Therefore, no determination was made as whether they were in violation of WMATA's drug and alcohol program policy. The probable cause of this event is a lack of supervisory oversight of the subcontractor. At the time of the event, the project safety manager was not present to ensure the work was being conducted properly and safely. Additionally, the project safety manager did not ensure that the injured subcontractor attended the required safety orientation prior to starting their work. Contributing factors were the glazer's lack of situational awareness and failure to readjust their fall arrest system. Metro Rail conducted and documented attendance for a safety stand down to reinforce safety procedures and fall protection. WMATA distributed a safety bulletin on fall protection and is conducting daily on-site safety meetings and weekly virtual safety meetings on an ongoing basis. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Quigley?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Loudon.
Mr. Quigley, when you talked about the project safety manager, are they assigned to one construction project, or are they assigned to multiple projects? Are they on site all the time on one project?
Yes, one site and one project.
Okay, so this individual was not on site, when the work was going on. Is that correct?
Correct. They were in a meeting.
Okay. Secondly, if you're a contractor for Washington Metro and you have issues like this, we've had a couple of falls under different circumstances. What happens with the contractor themselves? Are they disqualified from work, or is there anything that happens to them when they have an accident or they don't enforce their own rules?
That would be, I believe that is up to the subcontractor to decide, and WMATA as well.
Okay, but there's no program that if someone's not following the rules or ending up with accidents, that they're not allowed on the property anymore, or anything like that?
Not that we're aware of, but again, that's kind of discipline related, so we would have to take a deeper dive into that if you would like, sir.
Okay, I would just be interested if they have a way to disqualify contractors that are accident prone or something.
They have in the past. AMFs, that we found weren't, conducting the job safely, or ignoring procedures as an AMF, have been dismissed and not welcomed back. So it has happened before, but I can't tell you the process or procedure for it.
Okay, that's satisfactory for me. I just wondered if they address these issues directly with contractors or not. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Lobby. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Quigley? Okay, hearing none, the floor is yours, Mr. Quigley, to present the next report.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0170 involved the serious injury of a juvenile at L'Enfant Plaza Station, February 26, 2022. The juvenile fell from an escalator after attempting to improperly ride the unit from the upper level to the lower level platform and sustained serious injuries requiring medical transport to a hospital. After exiting a Green Line train on the upper level platform, the juvenile boarded descending escalator number 9. They sat on the handrail and began to ride it down before falling backward off the unit and onto the lower level platform. An MTPD officer who was on the platform administered aid and requested medical assistance. DC Fire and Emergency Medical Services arrived and transported the juvenile to a local hospital to be treated for a right arm fracture. Escalator number 9 was removed from service for a post-incident inspection, which determined that there were no defects to the unit that could have contributed to the event. The probable cause of this serious injury event is the improper use of the escalator by the juvenile. Metro Rail has signs and periodic automated announcements warning against the improper use of escalators. Thank you. This completes the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Quigley? Thank you. Moving on to the next item, investigations analyst Natalie Keyrose will present the next 2 reports. Ms. Keyrose.
Thank you, Chair Hart. The final 2 reports involve roadway worker protection violations. Investigation Whiskey 0171 occurred at Roslyn Station on February 15th, 2022, and involved an Office of Rail Transportation Supervisor improperly entering and exiting the roadway. The rail supervisor was granted foul time by the ROCC to retrieve an apparent piece of a gun that had been knocked onto the roadway as MTPD personnel apprehended a rider. Foul time is a form of protection where train traffic is stopped in a specific area for a limited time. The rail supervisor improperly accessed the roadway by jumping down from the middle of the platform. The supervisor had on a backpack while on the roadway and was not wearing a safety vest. The supervisor had at least 6 minutes to put on the proper protective equipment and prepare to properly enter the roadway before their foul time protection was granted. After retrieving the item, the supervisor improperly exited the roadway by stepping onto the running rail and being assisted to the platform by MTPD personnel. Metro Rail rules require personnel to access the roadway using the stairs at the end of the platform, to wear required personal protective equipment, including a safety vest, to not wear items such as a backpack on the roadway that pose a snag hazard, and to not step on top of the running rail. These violations were observed on CCTV, and the supervisor was removed for service for post-event toxicology testing, which determined they were not in violation of Metrorail's drug and alcohol policy. The probable cause of this event was Metrorail's culture that accepts noncompliance with written operational rules, procedures, and manuals. Contributing to this event was the perceived pressure and stress on the rail supervisor due to their running late and responding to assist with the police investigation. The rail supervisor had been running behind in reporting for their shift and therefore reported directly to Roslyn Station in their personal vehicle. Metrorail is developing policies and procedures for rail supervisors detailing instructions for reporting for duty, as well as policies and procedures for rail supervisors authorized to use their personal vehicles to direct report and clock in for duty at various locations. Metrorail is developing additional MTPD roll call meeting notes specific to roadway access violations and reporting. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Key Rose. Was there any disciplinary action taken against the individual? Ms. Key Rose?
The supervisor was removed from service, and I'm really not sure the rest of the disciplinary.
Okay.
We generally don't make discipline a focus of our investigations, but we could certainly work to get you that information.
I'm just curious in the bigger picture of how frequently you mentioned it looks like it's pretty generic to see non-compliance with written instructions. I'm just wondering what is done to try to make that a little less generic.
This certainly has been a finding in our audits. This seems to be a systemic concern. Very candidly, I don't think it's a concern Metro can punish its way out of. I think this is something that's going to really require systemic cultural change.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Key Rose?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lobby.
And Ms. Key Rose, this goes to report W0171 and 172. I'm just interested if the individuals involved were aware of the requirements. Is this a problem of individuals that know what the requirements are and choose not to follow them? Or is this a training issue or a lack of training on a particular aspect of roadway worker protection? And that goes for both of these reports, the one that you're also going to talk about in a minute.
Right. So the rail transportation supervisors are sufficiently trained. They go through yearly training for RWP and they have training to become a supervisor. So in this case, they knew the correct thing to do, and as the supervisor explained, he was running late, and then the adrenaline was running because MTPD, they actually had the person apprehended on the platform and they wanted help to get this piece of evidence from the roadway. When it comes to MTPD, they are not RWP trained, and I will explain it a little bit more in the next presentation. And that is something, one of the caps that they're going to have to fill and provide training for MTPD, because currently they are not RWP trained.
Okay, but in this first case, the individual knew what the requirements were, but because basically took a shortcut, maybe because of the seriousness of the situation, I don't know, but he did know what to do, but he didn't do it, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby. Any questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Key Rose? Okay, hearing none, Ms. Key Rose, the floor is yours to present the final investigation report for consideration today.
Thank you, Chair Hart. The final investigation report today, Whiskey 0172, involved another roadway worker protection violation, which took place on February 17th, 2022 at Shaw Howard University Station. In this instance, 2 MTPD officers fouled the track without permission or foul time from the ROCC while trying to retrieve a rider's cell phone instead of waiting for a rail supervisor. The officers attempted to retrieve the cell phone using a non-conductive grabber device, causing them to foul the track. Fouling the track, whether it is by entering the roadway or extending an object onto the roadway, is prohibited unless it's absolutely necessary. In this instance, foul time needed to be requested prior to using the grabber and granted by ROCC. However, MTPD officers are not trained to retrieve items from the roadway or request foul time. Requesting foul time is not covered in the curriculum taught to MTPD officers as a part of their training. The train operator of train 306 contacted the ROCC as the train entered Shaw Howard U Station on track 1 to report having no speed commands. While the train was stopped short of the A-car marker, MTPD officer number 2 continued to foul the track while trying to retrieve the phone. The train operator advised ROCC that an MTPD officer stopped the train before it could reach the A-car marker and that an officer was using an object to try to retrieve something from the roadway. MTPD officer number 2 stopped their attempt to retrieve the phone and waved the train forward. After the train serviced and departed the station, MTPD officer number 1 unsuccessfully attempted to retrieve the phone with the grabber as well. An Archer supervisor arrived at the station, requested and was granted foul time by ROCC, and entered the roadway and retrieved the rider's cell phone. This event occurred at 2:18 p.m. and was not reported to the WMSC until 5:32 p.m., outside of the 2-hour notification window required by the WMSC program standard. Metrorail has committed to reviewing MTPD RWP training materials at least annually to ensure rule updates are reflected. MTPD's mandatory in-service training will include reviews of ROCC emergency SOPs, including foul time. Metrorail is required to address finding 3 of the WMSC's 2022 audit of the emergency management and fire life safety programs, which found that MTPD personnel routinely enter the roadway despite not having RWP qualifications required by Metrorail rules and procedures. The corrective action plan includes completion of a gap analysis to determine the appropriate level of RWP training and necessary qualifications of all MTPD personnel who may enter the roadway. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Keyrose. That's an interesting conundrum that we've got someone who's trying to do the right thing and be helpful, but does it the wrong way. So that'll be an interesting one to see how they can work their way out of that and how we can help them do that. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Keyrose?
I have one question, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
Where did the grabber come from? Is this WMATA equipment or something? Where did they get the grabber to retrieve this phone?
They are kept in the kiosk at the stations.
Okay, and I assume that they're supposed to be used by the station managers who retrieve this stuff, not the police. Is that correct?
Yes, and they're supposed to notify Rock before any type of use of this cherry picker as well.
Okay, but it seems in this case, as opposed to the last one, this individual was not aware of the roadway worker protection issues and essentially, tried to be helpful and got in trouble for it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Lobby. Are there any other questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Keyrose? All right, hearing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to adopt the investigation reports that have just been presented, which is Whiskey 168, 169, 170, 171, and 172. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Bob. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Lobby. Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Say yay.
Aye.
Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
Chair Hart, the vote is 5-0 and motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We will now move on to our next action item on our agenda today, which is a resolution related to a revision of the WMSC program standard. Ms. Samara Singha will provide information on the update to that standard. Ms. Samara Singha.
Thank you, Chair Hart. The program standard is the governing document that lays out specific deadlines and requirements for Washington Metro to comply with. The WMSC is required to develop, maintain, and update the program standard at least annually to comply with federal regulations. This is the first major update to the program standard since April of last year. This revision is less extensive than last year's version, when we made significant updates throughout the document. This update addresses federal law changes contained in the bipartisan infrastructure law and a significantly revised safety certification section. WMSC staff began the program standard revision process last year. The process was led by the WMSC's Davis Rattick. We held meetings internally and consulted with WMATA personnel in developing a final draft. After the WMSC produced the final draft of the revision, we formally transmitted the draft to WMATA for their review. Metrorail provided additional feedback on the draft, and the WMSC carefully considered each of WMATA's comments and made any changes that were appropriate, given that the WMSC's role as the principal safety oversight authority for WMATA, and given the considerations of the new federal regulation requirements, guidelines, and best practices that require the WMSC to interact directly with employees and contractors at all levels of the Metrorail organization. In order to provide WMATA with additional time to align themselves with this program standard revision, the WMSC staff recommends that this revision take effect on July 11th. The effective date is noted in your draft resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Samarasinha. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Samarasinha? Ms. Samarasinha, the process of running this by WMATA, how is that a positive, favorable event, or is it viewed, is it an adversarial event? How would you describe that process?
So as our program standard requires, we provide this for Metrorail's review and feedback. The regulatory requirement on that front is the regulation leaves it largely to the scaling and scoping of each SSOA to determine how it communicates any revisions to an existing program standard, how you solicit input from the Rail Transit Agency, and so on. We did get extensive comments from WMATA on a variety of topics, more or less on the entirety of the program standard. And as my comments pointed out, we did spend a considerable amount of staff time reviewing each of those comments, doing a reference on the justification to include those or not, based on us conducting our work independently, interacting with Metro at all levels. And so Metro did provide the necessary feedback as we had requested, and we appreciate it. So to your comment on whether or not it's adversarial, I wouldn't be able to characterize it either way. They did provide extensive comments, which we then took on in a very serious note and evaluated sincerely.
And I will step in and say there's nothing adversarial in our relationship with Metro. We're not engaged in any sort of a fight on any front. This is a cooperative undertaking with the understanding that we are the safety regulatory authority.
Well, thank you. That is very helpful and speaks well to the collaboration between us around the common goal of improving safety. So thank you. Thank you for all that you, Dr. Meyer, and your staff do to help generate and maintain that collaborative relationship as opposed to an adversarial relationship. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Samarasinha? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to approve this program standard revision via resolution 2022-03?
So moved.
Motion, Commissioner Rush, thank you. Is there a second to Commissioner Rush's motion?
Second.
Commissioner Laube, thank you for the second. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay. Yay.
Yay.
Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
The vote is 5-0 and the motion passes, Chair Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. That completes the public portion of the business of our meeting for today. As a reminder, you can always report any concerns, any safety concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or by email. We expect to hold our next public meeting on August 9. Commissioners do have some further issues to address in executive session. Our bylaws permit closing a portion of this meeting to the public for specific purposes as specified in federal law. Today, this is business that relates solely to internal personnel matters. As 5 USC section 552B(f) requires, I request that council certify that the meeting may be closed to the public and to state the applicable exempting provision of the Sunshine Act.
Yes, Chair Hart. This portion of the meeting may be closed as specified in subsection C2 of 5 USC 552B, which addresses issues relating solely to internal personnel practices of the agency.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Pursuant to 5 USC 552B(d), a majority of members are required to vote to enter into executive session. So I would like to move that we go into executive session for the reasons stated by Mr. Smith, and that we then adjourn following that executive session. We will publicly reconfirm the topic discussed in the executive session at our next public meeting. So I make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Rush, for the second. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay. Yay.
Yay.
Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
Vote is 5-0 and the motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Commissioners, please leave this meeting and join the executive session. Before we leave the public portion of this meeting, I would like to thank Dr. Meyer and his team for arranging this remote meeting. I would like also to thank the commissioners for their extensive engagement in the process, including, as you saw at this meeting. And finally, I would like to thank the members of the public for attending, and we look forward to seeing you again on August 9th. So this portion of the meeting